Hi, my name's Joe Shannon, and I work at a firm called Shannon Law Group, with some very talented people. So our firm represents people that are catastrophically injured in bad collisions, and a lot of times they demand some expertise. What I asked one of our attorneys, Patrick Cummings, to do was to really delve into this area of law during his practice. And during his years of practice, he's gotten repeated exposure to these cases. And in fact, I asked him if he'd be kind enough to write a book so that we could send it to our clients and our friends so they know exactly what's going on with these cases. And he did. He wrote a book called Avoiding a Trucking Nightmare. The good thing about this book is that you can download it from our website, but we'll also send you a copy of it. But hey, better than that, we have Patrick with us today to talk about some trucking litigation and trucking cases. So I'm hopeful that you'll enjoy this session. How you doing, Patrick?
I'm good. How are you, Joe?
Good. So first of all, why don't you give the listeners a little background about where you grew up and where you're from and how you got to the point where you're a lawyer practicing law in Illinois and Wisconsin.
Sure. So I'm sitting here in Chicago, which is where I live now, but where Joe's sitting in Woodridge is not far from where I grew up. I grew up in the neighboring town, Lisle. Went to St. Joan of Arc in Lisle, went to Bennett in Lisle, and then for college I went up to Marquette in Milwaukee with John Switek, who's another associate here at the firm. And then for law school, I started out in Drexel in Philadelphia, which is kind of a fun place to do my first year. And then it was a little too far from home, so I moved back in the Chicagoland area, finished up my last 2 years at Northern Illinois. I started clerking with Joe when I was a third year law student and have been working with this firm ever since.
There's a big truck crash. What do people typically recover in these type of cases?
So there's two primary categories of damages. One is called economic damages, and those are sort of easy to calculate damages. Those are things that there's actual bills for oftentimes. So that's medical bills. That's if you miss time for work. It's called lost wages. There's also something called lost earning capacity. And so we've had clients that maybe had one job and it was a really good job, but because of their physical limitations, they can't return to that job. So they have to find some other work that makes half or 60% of what they were making at their previous job. The insurance company could be liable to pay for the difference between what they could have made over the course of their career at the job they had versus what they will make at the job that they're able to get given their new physical limitations.
Okay, so you talk about economic damages. That's basically stuff that's countable and tangible and usually is going to somebody else. Medical bills end up going to the doctors and insurance companies. The economic basically, the woman or man was working for a living and they were going to earn that anyway. So they're really not getting anything. There's other loss though, too, right?
There is. And generally it's called non-economic damages. That's the crux of a lot of our cases. So if you injure your shoulder, you can have a surgery on your shoulder. You can repair the shoulder. Hopefully you can get back to some close to what your previous condition was. Oftentimes that's not the case. So you may be entitled to what's called pain and suffering, which I think a lot of people have heard and generally kind of understand. And then in Illinois, there's something called loss of a normal life, which is the inability to enjoy the pleasurable aspects of life. So that differs for all of us. So Joe, I know you're a runner. I know that if you got injured, a knee injury in a crash and you couldn't go running, that's something that would affect your daily life and it'd be something you would miss. We have other clients that maybe are gardeners or maybe they're basketball players or golfers or whatever. And if their injury prevents them from being able to do that, there's value to that, and an insurance company may have to pay for it.
For example, somebody that has a brain injury, and one thing that we've learned in handling brain injury cases, because a lot of times the brain is injured in these big, tremendous collisions, is that we really understand the mortality of people, and we understand that the brain is a very sensitive organ. And that losing just a little bit of brain function can really affect somebody.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the brain's not like an ankle or any other joint or bone. I mean, you could sit on the couch and not necessarily notice that you have an ankle injury for an hour or 2 hours. You can kind of escape from it. Your brain, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you stick with it. And so a lot of our clients, if they feel like they're not as good as they used to be, the synapses aren't firing, or they struggle to find words, or they have short-term memory loss, that is something that just gives them stress and anxiety, knowing that they'll never be as good as they were from the day before the crash. That's an important loss to a lot of our clients.
Yeah, one of the key parts of our job is to explain to juries just how significant it is to go from totally independent to full dependence on others or partial dependence. I mean, think about how that would affect your relationship with your spouse, your kids, especially your work. I mean, say for example, a surgeon who was just going gangbusters before, knew exactly where all the nerves were, knew exactly where all the muscles were, all these types of things. And then his mind gets scrambled just a little bit, or her mind gets scrambled just a little bit, how that can completely throw a haywire their whole livelihood. Not to mention all the different things that we're talking about as far as depression, other types of, mood disorders, that type of thing that can happen. That's a big part of our job, is being able to communicate what that's like. Isn't that true, Patrick?
Yeah, and listen, independence is something that I take for granted every day. Less so now that I see clients that it changes in an instant. Piggybacking off your point, though, Joe, about the way it affects relationships, and we see it far too often with our clients, is you have an independent person with a brain injury. They've been married for 25 years. Well, that strains that relationship with your spouse, because instead of a typical spousal relationship, now you kind of have a caretaker-patient relationship, and that's difficult. And so one of the real joys I've had in the last several years is we had a client who, she was injured in a crash. She spent more than a year in hospitals and inpatient rehab facilities. And as a result of the resolution of her case, we were able to get her back home. We were able to get her home retrofitted, and we were able to get her the home health care that she needed. So while she's not living fully independently, she's living a much more independent life than had we not been involved.
The other thing that people have to understand, and thing that we have to really communicate, typically the way a lawyer is paid that does the work that we do is that folks don't pay us an hourly fee. We don't send them any bills. We recover a percentage of the recovery. So, a percentage of the medical bills or a percentage of the lost wages, that's taking money right out of, right off the bat, just cut them off at the knees. But then even taking a more of a percentage when we get paid out of the, loss of a normal life, out of pain and suffering, and then also, we didn't talk about it, but disfigurement. Those are numbers that are the biggest part of the case, in my opinion, just because, who we are as people isn't how much medical bills are paid or how much lost wages there are. The most important thing is how this has really crucially affected your life. Have you found that experience, Patrick?
Yeah, what I have, Joe. And the thing is, in a perfect world, you wouldn't need plaintiff lawyers, because insurance company lawyers would, and their insurance company adjusters, they would understand the significant losses of their clients, and they'd be treated fairly. And unfortunately, that's not the case. And that's why we do have to get involved, because part of our job, we talked about the investigation part earlier, but the other part is at the end of the day, we're kind of storytellers, and we need to be able to explain to a jury of 12 people, what happened in this crash, how it happened, how it could be prevented, and then more importantly, how it's affected your life, and then how it's going to affect your life as you go forward. And so I think that's one of our most important jobs as trial lawyers.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate you taking time. And again, thanks for writing your book. It's called Avoiding a Trucking Nightmare: What You Need to Know After a Truck-Related Injury. And it's simple to read. It's a good resource, and you can pick it up at shannonlawgroup.com. You should also, if you like the information that we're providing to you, you should subscribe to our YouTube channel at Shannon Law Group. So I hope you enjoyed this taping, and we look forward to hosting more of these tapes in the future. Thank you very much.